If you ever get a call like this, do not answer. True stories. Picture this. It's 2:47 a.m. Your phone rings. You're half asleep, and for a split second your brain thinks it might be an emergency. Maybe a family member, maybe work. You reach for it in the dark. The screen lights up your face. Unknown number. You hesitate. Your thumb hovers over the green button. And here's the thing most people don't realize in that moment. Sometimes the scariest part isn't who's calling. It's what happens when you answer. Now you might be thinking, come on, it's just a phone call. What's the worst that could happen? And look, I get it. We all get spam calls. We all get robocalls. But what I'm about to tell you goes way beyond that. Because there are calls, real documented calls, where the person on the other end shouldn't have been able to call. Calls from numbers that don't exist. Calls from people who are already dead. And in some cases, the people who answered, well, they wish they hadn't. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about impossible phone calls and who was on the other side. If you're someone who loves real stories about calls that shouldn't have happened, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, and drop a like if this video helps you understand why some calls should never, ever be answered. Today I'm going to walk you through 3 real cases. 3 documented incidents where people received calls that defied explanation. And by the end of this video you're going to understand something that most people never think about. Your phone isn't just a device that connects you to other people. Sometimes, it connects you to something else entirely. But before we get into that, I need you to understand something about the psychology of phone calls. Here's what most people don't realize. The telephone is one of the most intimate forms of communication we have. Think about it. When someone calls you, their voice is right there, inches from your ear, inside your head. There's no visual information to help you assess the situation. You can't see their body language. You can't read their face. You're completely dependent on sound. And that creates a vulnerability. Our brains are wired to respond to voices. When you hear someone speak, especially someone you know, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. You trust voices instinctively. That's why phone scams work so well. That's why voice phishing is so effective. Because even though we know logically that we should be careful, our primal brain says, this is a human voice. I should listen. But here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when that instinct gets hijacked? What happens when something or someone uses that vulnerability against you? That's exactly what happened to a woman named Sarah Mitchell in the fall of 2019. Sarah Mitchell was a 34-year-old elementary school teacher living in Portland, Oregon. By all accounts, she was ordinary. Normal life, normal job, normal routine. She lived alone in a modest apartment, had a cat named Biscuit, and spent most evenings grading papers and watching Netflix. On October 14, 2019, at exactly 11:34 p.m., Sarah's phone rang. She was already in bed, almost asleep, when the sound jolted her awake. She looked at the screen. Unknown caller. Now Sarah was smart. She never answered unknown numbers. But here's the thing, the phone kept ringing. And ringing. And ringing. Most calls go to voicemail after 4 or 5 rings. This one didn't stop. It rang 12 times. 15. 20. Sarah told police later that she answered it just to make it stop. Just to tell whoever it was to leave her alone. She pressed the green button. Hello. Silence. Hello? Who is this? And then static. Not regular phone static, but something else. Something that sounded layered, like multiple frequencies overlapping. And underneath that static, Sarah swore she could hear something. A voice? Maybe. Speaking very, very quietly. She hung up immediately. Her hands were shaking. Look, she couldn't explain why, but every instinct in her body told her that something was wrong about that call. She checked the call log. The number showed up as 00000000000. That's not a real number. That's a null value. That's what shows up when the phone system can't identify the origin of a call. Sarah tried to sleep. She couldn't. She kept thinking about that static, about the voice underneath it. At 2:47 a.m., exactly 3 hours and 13 minutes later, her phone rang again. Same number. 0000000000. This time, Sarah didn't answer. She let it ring. She counted 37 rings before it stopped. She turned her phone off completely and buried it under her pillow. The next morning, she woke up to find her phone on her nightstand, turned on, with 17 missed calls from 0000000000, all of them between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Here's where it gets really interesting. Sarah's phone was turned off. She was certain of it. She'd held down the power button and watched the screen go black. But somehow it had turned itself back on. Now you might be thinking, maybe she didn't turn it off properly. Maybe it glitched. And look, I thought the same thing. But Sarah took her phone to the Verizon store that afternoon. The technician ran diagnostics. The phone was fine. No malware. No software issues. No hardware problems. The technician did notice something odd though. The call logs showed those 17 missed calls. But when he checked the phone's data usage, there was no record of any incoming cellular activity during that time period. It was as if the calls had happened, but also hadn't happened. Sarah asked if they could block the number. The technician tried. He entered 0000000000 into the block list. The system wouldn't accept it. It returned an error message, cannot block null value. Sarah left the store more unsettled than when she'd arrived. That night, October 15th, Sarah decided she wasn't going to sleep in her apartment. She drove to her sister's house in Beaverton, about 20 minutes away. She left her phone in her car. She didn't tell her sister exactly what was happening, just said she needed a place to crash for the night. At 11:34 p.m., Sarah's sister's landline rang. Nobody calls landlines anymore. Sarah's sister almost didn't answer it, but something made her pick up. Hello. Static. And then very clearly a voice. A woman's voice, speaking in a monotone, emotionless cadence. Where is Sarah? Sarah's sister felt her blood run cold. Who is this? Where is Sarah Mitchell? I'm calling the police. Tell her to answer. Tell her to answer when I call. Click. Sarah's sister was pale when she walked into the living room. She told Sarah what had happened, word for word. And here's the thing that made Sarah start crying. Her sister had never mentioned Sarah's last name on that call, but the voice had known it. Sarah called the police that night. They took a report. They were professional, polite, but you could tell they thought it was probably a prank. Some kind of elaborate harassment. They said they'd look into it. The calls continued. Every night. 11:34 p.m. Then 2:47 a.m. Then random times throughout the day. Always the same number. Always that layered static. And now, sometimes Sarah could hear the voice clearly. Answer. You need to answer. It's almost time. The police did investigate. Detective Marcus Webb from the Portland Police Bureau's Cybercrime Division took over the case after Sarah filed 3 more reports. Detective Webb was thorough. He'd worked fraud cases, cyberstalking cases, harassment cases. He'd seen a lot, but he'd never seen anything like this. Webb subpoenaed phone records from Verizon. He wanted to trace the origin of the calls. But here's what he found. According to Verizon's network logs, no calls had been placed to Sarah Mitchell's number during the time she reported receiving them. The network showed no activity. No data packets. No routing information. Nothing. But Sarah's phone showed the calls. The call duration. The timestamps. Everything. Webb had Sarah's phone examined by the FBI's cyber forensics team. They tore it apart, software and hardware. They found nothing. No spyware. No remote access tools. No indication that anyone was manipulating the device remotely. One of the FBI technicians, a guy named Chin who'd worked on some pretty high-level cases, told Webb something off the record. He said, Look, I've been doing this for 12 years. I've seen phones hacked in ways you wouldn't believe. But this is different. It's like the calls are happening in some kind of parallel channel. They're real to the phone, but they don't exist in the network. That shouldn't be possible. Webb asked the obvious question. So what does that mean? Chin just shook his head. I have no idea. Detective Webb started digging into Sarah's background. Maybe someone from her past was harassing her. Maybe an ex-boyfriend, a former student's parent, someone with a grudge. He found nothing. Sarah was squeaky clean. No enemies. No drama. No red flags anywhere in her history. But then Webb started looking at the timing of the calls. 11:34 p.m. 2:47 a.m. Those specific times. He ran them through various databases looking for significance. And he found something. In 1987, 32 years before Sarah started receiving the calls, a woman named Rebecca Carmichael was murdered in Portland. She was stabbed 14 times in her apartment. The estimated time of death, between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. Rebecca Carmichael's body was discovered by her sister at 2:47 a.m. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Rebecca Carmichael was also 34 years old. She was also an elementary school teacher. She also lived alone. And she lived in the same apartment building where Sarah Mitchell now lived. Same building. Different unit. Webb felt his skin crawl when he made that connection. The Rebecca Carmichael case was never solved. The killer was never found. It went cold decades ago. But Webb pulled the old case files. He read through the detective notes. And buried in the witness statements, he found something that made his blood run cold. Rebecca's sister, the one who found the body, told police that Rebecca had been acting strange in the weeks before her death. She'd been paranoid, anxious. She said she kept getting phone calls in the middle of the night. Calls where nobody spoke. Just static. Just breathing. Rebecca told her sister that the calls felt wrong. That whoever was calling knew things about her. That the voice, when she could hear it, kept saying the same thing. Answer when I call. Webb told Sarah everything. He felt she deserved to know. And honestly, he was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a standard stalking case. Sarah was terrified. She wanted to move out of the apartment immediately. But she'd signed a year lease. She didn't have the money to break it and find a new place. So she stayed. But she changed her phone number. Completely new number, new SIM card, new device. She thought that would end it. It didn't. The first call came that same night. 11:34 p.m. 0000000000. Sarah didn't answer. But this time the voice left a voicemail. She listened to it the next morning with Detective Webb sitting across from her at the police station. He played it on speaker. It was 19 seconds long. Static, then a woman's voice clearer than ever before. You can't run from me, Sarah. I've been waiting so long. 32 years. You're almost ready. When you answer, we'll finally be together. You're going to help me cross. Just answer. Please answer. The voice sounded desperate, pleading. And then, in the last second of the recording, there was something else. A sound underneath the voice. A wet, rasping sound. Like someone trying to breathe through a severed throat. Webb's face went white. He'd read the autopsy report for Rebecca Carmichael. One of the stab wounds had punctured her trachea. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't she just get rid of the phone? Throw it away? Go off the grid? And look, she tried. Sarah smashed her phone with a hammer. She threw the pieces in a dumpster behind a grocery store across town. 2 days later, a brand new phone arrived at her apartment. Same model. It was in a box on her doorstep. No return address. No shipping label. Just a note inside. Please answer. The phone was already activated. With her number. The same number she just destroyed. Sarah called Detective Webb hysterical. Webb came to her apartment. He took the phone as evidence. He wanted to trace where it came from, who sent it. But that night at 11:34 p.m., Sarah's apartment landline rang. A landline she'd never used, didn't even know worked because it came with the apartment and she'd never plugged in a phone. But it was ringing. The sound was coming from the wall jack in her kitchen. Sarah put her ear close to it. Through the plastic plate she could hear it. Ringing. And ringing. And then, "Sarah, please, I'm so cold. I've been alone for so long. Just answer. Let me in. Let me in." Detective Webb arranged for Sarah to stay in a safe location. A hotel room paid for by the department while they figured out what the hell was going on. He had patrol officers drive by her apartment every hour. He installed security cameras. But here's the thing about this situation. How do you protect someone from something that isn't following physical rules? On October 31, 2019, exactly 17 days after the first call, Sarah Mitchell called Detective Webb at 11:28 p.m. She sounded calm. Too calm. "I'm going to answer," she said. "Sarah, no. Don't. I can't live like this anymore, Detective. I can't. Every day it gets worse. I hear her in my head now. Even when the phone isn't ringing. She's everywhere. I need to know what she wants. I need this to end. Sarah, listen to me. Thank you for everything you tried to do. I mean that." She hung up. Webb immediately dispatched units to Sarah's hotel. They got there in 6 minutes. The door was locked from the inside. They had to break it down. Sarah was sitting on the bed, her phone in her hand. The call log showed one outgoing call at 11:34 p.m. Duration ongoing. The call was still connected. But Sarah wasn't moving. Her eyes were open. She was staring at the wall. The paramedics checked her vitals. She was alive. Breathing. Heart beating. But completely unresponsive. Catatonic. They couldn't end the call. When they tried to take the phone from her hand, her grip tightened. When they tried to power it off, it wouldn't respond. The screen showed the call timer climbing. 1 minute and 43 seconds. 1 minute and 44 seconds. 1 minute and 45 seconds. Finally, one of the officers just yanked the battery out of the phone. Sarah gasped. Her eyes focused. She looked around, confused, like she was waking from a dream. What happened? She didn't remember making the call. She didn't remember answering. The last thing she remembered was lying down to sleep at 10 p.m. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Sarah Mitchell's case wasn't isolated. Detective Webb started reaching out to other departments. He wanted to know if anyone else had encountered similar cases. And what he found was disturbing. Between 2018 and 2020, there were at least 47 documented cases across the United States of people reporting calls from 00000000000 or similar null value numbers. In 17 of those cases, the people reported hearing voices that made specific references to unsolved murders or missing persons cases in their geographic area. In 8 cases, the recipients of the calls went missing. In 3 cases, the recipients died under mysterious circumstances. Webb compiled all of this into a report. He sent it up the chain. It ended up on the desk of an FBI liaison who specialized in what they call anomalous communication events. Yes, that's a real term. The FBI has a very small, very quiet division that investigates unexplained technological phenomena. They don't publicize it. Most agents don't even know it exists. But it's there. An agent named Elizabeth Cross reached out to Webb. She'd been tracking similar cases internationally. She told him something that made his skin crawl. Detective Webb, these calls follow a pattern. They target people who are living in locations where violent deaths occurred. Specifically, unsolved violent deaths. The victims of those deaths seem to be reaching out. We don't know how. We don't know why. But the people who answer, they become conduits, bridges, and something crosses over through them. Webb asked the obvious question, crosses over from where? Cross paused on the phone for a long time. Then she said, "We're not sure. But we think it's connected to unresolved trauma." Violent deaths, especially unsolved ones, seem to create, I don't know what to call it, an echo? A resonance? The victims can't move on, can't let go. And the phone system, electromagnetic signals, radio waves, somehow lets them reach out to the living, to people in their old spaces. It's like they're trying to communicate the only way they can. So what happens to the people who answer? Another long pause. They become stuck, trapped between here and wherever the victim is. Most of them recover eventually, but some. Cross's voice dropped. Some of them never come back fully. Part of them stays on the other side of that call. Forever. Sarah Mitchell was hospitalized for 6 days after the incident. Psychiatric evaluation. She was diagnosed with acute dissociative disorder and severe PTSD. But here's the thing. Sarah's symptoms didn't match typical trauma responses. She described vivid, consistent memories of being in a dark place. A place where she could hear hundreds, maybe thousands, of voices all trying to speak at once. All trying to be heard. She said she felt Rebecca Carmichael there. Felt her desperation. Her loneliness. Her rage at being forgotten. Sarah said Rebecca didn't want to hurt her. Rebecca wanted to use her. To borrow her life. To step into her body and live again. She showed me how she died, Sarah told the psychiatrist. Every detail. I felt the knife. I felt her throat filling with blood. I felt her trying to scream and not being able to. I felt her watching her killer walk away. I felt 32 years of being nowhere. Being nothing. Just waiting. Calling. Hoping someone would finally answer. The psychiatrist prescribed medication. Therapy. Sarah returned to work after 3 months. But she never used a phone again. She communicates exclusively through email and text messages sent from her laptop. She doesn't own a smartphone. She doesn't have a landline. When friends ask why, she tells them she prefers being less connected. But Detective Webb knows the truth. He checks in on her every few months. And Sarah told him once, late at night, in a moment of vulnerability, I can still hear her sometimes. In the static of TVs. In the white noise of fans. In the hum of electrical wires. She's still there. Still calling. Still waiting for someone else to answer. And you know what the worst part is? I understand her now. I understand what it's like to be trapped. To be forgotten. And part of me, a small, terrible part of me, wishes I could help her. But I can't. Because if I let her in again, I know I won't come back. The third case I want to tell you about is different. Because it's not about someone receiving an impossible call. It's about someone making one. James Cooper was a 52-year-old hospice nurse from Savannah, Georgia. He'd worked in end-of-life care for over 20 years. He was good at his job. Compassionate. Patient. The kind of person who could sit with dying patients and make them feel less afraid. James had seen a lot of death. He thought he understood it. He thought he'd made peace with it. He was wrong. In March of 2021, James was assigned to a patient named Eleanor Vaughn. She was 78 years old, terminal lung cancer, maybe 2 weeks left to live. Eleanor had no family. No visitors. Just James checking in on her twice a day at her small house on the outskirts of town. Eleanor was lucid most of the time. She talked to James about her life, her regrets, her fears. And one thing she kept coming back to, she was terrified of dying alone. I just want to know someone will remember me, she told James. That someone will know I was here. That I mattered. James promised her he'd be there. He'd make sure she wasn't alone. On March 19th, James got a call from Eleanor's neighbor. Eleanor had fallen. The neighbor couldn't wake her up. James rushed over. Eleanor was unconscious, barely breathing. Actively dying. James called 911, but he knew there was nothing they could do. This was it. He held her hand. He talked to her softly, telling her it was okay to let go. That he was there. That she wasn't alone. Eleanor died at 4:17 p.m. James felt sad but also at peace. He'd kept his promise. She hadn't died alone. He called the funeral home. He called hospice administration. He started the process of closing out Eleanor's case. And then at 9:53 p.m. that night, James's phone rang. The caller ID showed Eleanor Vaughn. James stared at his phone. That wasn't possible. Eleanor was dead. Her body was at the funeral home. Her cell phone was in a box of her belongings that James had packed up that afternoon. But the phone kept ringing. James answered. Maybe it was a mistake. A pocket dial somehow. Some glitch in the system. Hello? James? It was Eleanor's voice. James felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Eleanor? James, I'm so scared. I don't know where I am. It's dark. I can hear things but I can't see. Where am I? What's happening? James's hands were shaking. Eleanor, you passed away. This afternoon. No, I'm here. I'm somewhere. James, please, I need help. You said I wouldn't be alone. You promised. Please don't leave me here. The line went dead. James sat in his car in Eleanor's driveway for 20 minutes, trying to process what just happened. His rational mind told him it was impossible. A prank. A cruel joke. Maybe someone had gotten Eleanor's phone somehow. But the voice, the fear in it sounded exactly like Eleanor. James went home. He tried to sleep. He couldn't. At 2:34 a.m., his phone rang again. Eleanor Vaughn. This time, James didn't answer. He let it ring. It went to voicemail. In the morning, he listened to the message. James, please. I've been calling and calling. It's so cold here. I can feel things moving around me, but I can't see them. I can hear voices, but they're not saying words. They're just sounds. Please, James. You said you'd take care of me. You promised I wouldn't be alone. Please answer. Please. James called his supervisor at the hospice. Explained what was happening. His supervisor was sympathetic but firm. Grief can do strange things to people, even to professionals. Maybe James needed some time off. Maybe he should talk to someone. James knew how it sounded. He wouldn't have believed it either. But the calls kept coming. Every few hours. Sometimes more often. Always Eleanor's voice. Always getting more desperate. James, I'm fading. I can feel myself disappearing. Please, I need you to remember me. I need you to hold on to me. If you forget me, I'll be gone completely. I'll be nothing. Please don't let me become nothing. James did something he knew he probably shouldn't do. He went to the funeral home. He asked to see Eleanor's body. He told them he'd left something in her belongings and needed to retrieve it. They led him into the preparation room. Eleanor was there, on a table, covered with a sheet. James approached slowly. He pulled back the sheet just enough to see her face. She looked peaceful. Dead. Definitely dead. But her cell phone, the one that should have been in the box of belongings, was in her right hand. Under the sheet, the screen was glowing, showing an active call to James's number. James felt his knees go weak. He reached out slowly and took the phone from Eleanor's hand. It was cold. The screen showed, call duration, 4 hours 36 minutes and 12 seconds. Over 4 hours. James brought the phone to his ear. James? Eleanor's voice. But different now. Hollow. Distant. I can see you, James. I can see you standing there, looking at me. I'm still here. I'm still in here. I can't get out. Why can't I get out? What's happening to me? James dropped the phone. It clattered on the floor. The screen cracked. But the call didn't disconnect. James became obsessed with figuring out what was happening. He started researching. He found Detective Webb's report online. It had been leaked to some fringe paranormal forums. He found other cases. He found patterns. He discovered something that Detective Webb and Agent Cross had also found but hadn't publicized. The calls seemed to come from people who died with unresolved attachments. People who weren't ready. Who had unfinished business. Who were clinging to life so desperately that even death couldn't fully sever their connection. And cell phones, Devices that were so intimately connected to their owners, that contained their voices, their messages, their digital presence, seemed to act as anchors, tethers to the living world. James theorized that Eleanor was stuck, trapped in some kind of liminal space between life and death. And his promise to her, that he'd be there, that she wouldn't be alone, had created a bond. An obligation that she was now using to pull herself back, to refuse to let go. He wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. The calls continued. Eleanor's voice became less human over time, more distorted, more fragmented. James, Dark, can't help me. James, please, dying again, and again, and again. James consulted with a priest, Father Michael Donnelly, a man who specialized in end-of-life spiritual care. James explained everything. Father Donnelly listened carefully. When James finished, the priest was quiet for a long time. You made a promise you couldn't keep, Father Donnelly finally said. You told her she wouldn't be alone. But you can't follow someone beyond death, James. That's not a promise humans can make. And now she's holding you to it. She's using your connection to avoid facing what comes next. So what do I do? You have to release her. And yourself. You have to tell her it's okay to let go. That you can't go with her. That she has to move forward alone. It will be hard. She'll resist. But it's the only way. That night, when Eleanor called at 9:53 p.m., the same time as the first call, James answered. Eleanor, I need to talk to you. James, thank God. Please, you have to help me. I'm so scared. I'm so alone. I know you are. And I'm sorry. But Eleanor, you have to let go. You have to move on. I can't keep you here. And you can't stay anymore. No. James, you promised. You said I wouldn't be alone. I was wrong to promise that. I can't go where you need to go. Nobody can. You have to do this yourself. Eleanor's voice changed, became angry, vicious. You liar. You coward. You're leaving me, just like everyone else. I'll make you regret this. I'll make you stay with me. I'll pull you here with me. The call quality deteriorated. Static flooded the line. And underneath it, James could hear something else. Screaming. Not Eleanor's voice. Many voices. A chorus of the lost and the stuck and the desperate. James felt a terrible coldness wash over him. A pulling sensation, like something was trying to drag him down through the phone, through the connection, into whatever dark place Eleanor was trapped in. I'm sorry, James whispered. I'm so sorry. And he hung up. James blocked Eleanor's number. The call stopped. But for 3 weeks after that, James felt like he was being watched. He'd wake up in the middle of the night with the certainty that someone was standing at the foot of his bed. He'd hear his phone ringing, not the actual phone, but a phantom ringing in his head. He quit his job at the hospice. He couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't sit with dying patients. Couldn't make them promises. Couldn't witness that transition from life to death, knowing what he now knew, that sometimes people don't cross over. Sometimes they get stuck. Sometimes they linger. And sometimes they reach out. James moved to a different state. Changed his number. Started over. But he told me, through an encrypted email because he wouldn't talk on the phone, that he still hears Eleanor sometimes. Late at night. In the silence. A distant voice calling his name, asking him to remember, begging him not to forget. I can't forget, James wrote, even though I want to, even though it would be easier. Because if I forget her completely, if everyone forgets her, then she really will be nothing. And I can't do that to her. Even now, even after everything. So I remember, and I carry her with me. And I hope, I pray, that somehow that's enough. That someday she'll be able to let go. So here's what most people don't realize about phone calls. They're not just transmitting sound. They're transmitting presence, identity, connection. When you talk on the phone, you're not just hearing someone's voice. You're engaging with their consciousness, their essence. And when someone dies, especially someone who dies with unfinished business, with desperate attachments, with promises they're clinging to, that essence doesn't always go away. It lingers in the electromagnetic spectrum, in the infrastructure of our communication systems, in the devices we carry every single day. Detective Webb, Agent Cross, and a handful of other investigators have compiled data on hundreds of cases like Sarah's and James's. They've found that the phenomenon is getting more common, more intense, and nobody knows why. Some theories suggest it's because we're more connected than ever before. We spend more time on our devices. We document our entire lives digitally. We create stronger and stronger digital imprints. And when we die, those imprints don't disappear. They echo. They resonate. They reach out. Other theories are darker. They suggest that there are things on the other side, whatever the other side is, that are learning how to use our technology, how to manipulate it, how to bridge the gap between death and life using the very tools we created to connect with each other. Here's what I want you to understand. If you ever get a call like this, from a number that doesn't make sense, from someone who shouldn't be able to call, from a voice that sounds wrong, do not answer. I know curiosity is powerful. I know the urge to know what's on the other side. But trust me, some doors once opened can't be closed. If you do answer, if it's too late, here's what you need to remember. First, the voice on the other end is not trying to help you. It's trying to use you, to anchor itself through you, to pull you into whatever space it's trapped in. Second, do not make promises. Do not agree to anything. Do not try to help. The moment you create an obligation, you create a tether, and that tether can pull you down. Third, end the call immediately. Block the number. Turn off your phone if you have to. And if the calls continue, if they escalate, find someone who specializes in this. Detective Webb's report is public now. Agent Cross has published guidelines. There are people who can help. Don't try to handle it alone. Sarah Mitchell, update final. I reached out to Sarah one more time before making this video. Through email, obviously. I asked her if there was anything she wanted people to know. Anything that might help someone else in her situation. She responded, "Tell them that loneliness is powerful. Tell them that death doesn't end it. Sometimes it amplifies it. The